Welcome, everyone, to another session of the 11th Annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. It is presented by Northeastern State University. And the session today is one of the 60-hour-long sessions we have to Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. And I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator for this session. As a reminder, all of our sessions are closed captioned. To view the captions, simply click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Today's session is how to present information in higher education. We are fortunate to have with us Tom Tobin from the University of Madison, Wisconsin. Tom has been with us presenting sessions for what seems like a zillion times, and we're really glad to have him back. So, Tom, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Bob, and welcome everybody to this session, everybody who is watching the live session, or if you're experiencing the recording as well. I'm grateful to Bob Hales and to Northeastern State University for inviting me to come back to you for the zillionth and first time. And my name's Tom Tobin. I'm the Program Area Director for Distance Teaching and Learning on the Learning, Design, Development, and Innovation team at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Now, I've been a professor, a professional presenter at conferences, a keynote speaker, and a higher education consultant with some of the largest professional organizations, including EDUCAUSE, OLC, Magna Publications. In this session, you will learn 4 secrets to creating and facilitating more engaging presentations. Not only will I present them to you, but you will leave with a new set of tools specific to your own situation. So prepare for an interactive and hands-on conversation. Make sure you're near a keyboard, or if you're watching the session recording, make sure you have a way to pause the video and have a notepad or a laptop handy so you can take an active role while you watch. So let me share a couple of secrets. The first one, we've all been to that presentation. Think back to the last conference that you attended, or the last lecture you sat in on, or the last interaction where somebody was presenting information in a scholarly way. That last departmental meeting, the retreat, professional development workshop. Chances are you've sat through some pretty dry presentations in your time. I know I have. Now, the ideas may have been great, but you probably left thinking, boy, I'll never get back that hour of my life, right? Now, on the other hand, think about the most engaging, dynamic, effective presentations that you have experienced. You know, the ones where you couldn't wait to come back to your institution and try out those ideas for yourself. And by the way, just a housekeeping note, I hear a little bit of rustling and keyboarding in the background. If you go on mute, you'll help out with that background noise. So let's start with a quick quiz. And if you're in the chat, I've just posted some ideas up here on the screen. All of the elements that are on the screen right now help to make presentations more memorable. But which ones would you say are the top 4, the most effective techniques? Pause and either write down your predictions, or if you're bold, you want to throw those into the chat. We'll take a look at what everybody's feeling here. And we've got a vote for body language right off the bat. An excellent start for us here. Let's see, interaction and visuals, interaction, visuals, body language, eye contact, interaction, eye contact, visuals, eye contact, visuals and interaction, body language, interaction, eye contact, and visuals. Someone's voting for research, awesome. Let's see, expertise, interaction, overview, visuals, interaction, body language, eye contact, interaction. I'm reading off of the chat here, and it sounds like the majority of the folks who are here in the live session are going for things like eye contact, body language, interaction. Joel's even putting another one in here. Energy and expertise are also important. And a question is, does it mean time as in the length of the session? Ooh, we're actually going to get into that. So a little bit of a spoiler in that question, and I'm glad you asked. So we've got level of passion that the speaker has for the topic. I will say to everybody that almost everything you've put in here has to do with the level of engagement that people have with the information that you are presenting. You are all correct. And as they say in the book 1984, some of you are more correct than others. Let's take a look at the 4 that are the actual top 4 most engaging things. Time. And Emery asked, does this mean the total length of time of the session? And it actually doesn't. It means, how do you spend your time when you're presenting information to other people? You'll notice a couple of the ones that aren't on this list. Body language isn't here. Eye contact isn't here, but the use of visuals is. The level of detail that you go into when you are explaining information. We're going to talk about why that's important and how to do it differently from 99% of the people who are presenting content today. And you are all correct that interaction is really the key. In fact, it's so important that after we got through all the introductions and the housekeeping, look what we did in this particular webinar. I went right in and asked you to start thinking and doing and interacting right off the bat. So thank you very much for all of the interaction that we've done so far. And let's uncover a few pieces here. The first secret is time. On your screen, there's a gentleman in front of a podium. There are people in the audience watching, and there's a meme that you may have seen before with the lady screaming at Smudge the cat, and she's saying you didn't leave any time for Q&A, and Smudge says, well, I covered everything. So here's one of the challenges. When we are putting content together to present to other people, we can think from a perspective of having to cover everything. And that's actually doing ourselves and our audiences a disservice. Think about it. When was the last time you were at a conference presentation and they just ran right out of time because they were trying to cram everything in and everything in? So answer one of these 2 questions. When was the last time that you attended a presentation where there was ample time for conversation at the end? I hear a couple of people thinking never on this one, or when was the last time a presenter ran out of time? So if you have a, yeah, Kate says that was December when somebody ran out of time the last time around for me. So we've got a mindset that the time that we are allotted is the time that we should take. And I want to change that mindset. Here we go. When you're presenting information, one of those first best practices for how to manage your time is engage people. So were you better able to recall that time when a presenter ran over time rather than one when there was plenty of time for interaction? Well, that happens a lot, right? And Carolyn says, I cannot remember. There is never enough time. And that's actually the secret that I want to share with you folks. Notice what we did though. Before you learned any new information, you all took an action. Even if the interaction that you were guessing about something and you didn't really have a lot of information to go on, you started thinking about it. So the first rule of presentation time management is that it pays you back to engage your audience, ask them to take an action or do something right away, even before they know what you're talking about. Get them going, ask them a question, get them to do a poll, ask for comments, get 2 brave volunteers to help you with a task, anything to get the people with you instead of just being in the same room or on the same webinar with you. So the first practice for time management is it pays to engage. The second time management practice is tell some stories. Now, we have impressive research data to support our new theories and make sure that they're methodologically sound. But pick one story that exemplifies your topic, your trend, or your idea, and your audience will listen better and remember it longer. Remember on that one slide where I started off time and I gave you the story of that meme with the lady yelling at Smudge the cat? That's a story, and we're going to hang a lot of information on it. So One of those best practices is engage with your learners. Another best practice is tell stories. Also, get to the point. Have you ever gone to a presentation where the first 10 minutes were all about the presenter's institution, right? We are a small private college in a wooded area. We have 1,341 students. We were founded in 1883, right? You've heard those presentations. Get rid of all of that kind of stuff. Get right into what you want people to think about and remember. Even though you've got a lot of data and information, your time is short, as Carolyn just remembered here, and it doesn't make any sense to spend it on things that don't have an impact for your listeners. So getting right to the point, unless it has to do directly with your topic, just omit it. Now, here's the fun one for time management, and that is plan for 2/3 of the time. If you've got 60 minutes to work with, plan about 40 minutes of interactions. No one ever complained by getting out of a session early. And if there's lots of interest, if there's conversation, if somebody asks a question in the middle and you want to go off on a different path, you can do it. You're okay. This is kind of the secret. And if you're planning for that 2/3, figure it out. And how do you know what 2/3 of your time is? Well, figure out how to estimate. So if you have a script, and by the way, I've got a script. I'm not reading word for word from it, but when I did my time estimates, I certainly read aloud from my script and just double check to make sure that just the presentation itself took about 30 minutes out of the 60 minutes that we're working on in this webinar, and I'm planning for lots more interaction as well. So to review, in terms of time management, engage your listeners right away. Tell them stories that exemplify the things you want them to remember. Simplify it down. Get to the point. Don't spend a lot of time necessarily talking about background information, and plan for 2/3 of the time. And that way, if you run over or there's lots of interest from your audience, you are prepared and you can be flexible. So let's take a pause here, and in the chat, what's one thing that you'll do either differently, or did we underline something that you already do and you're already doing well, and now you know it's one of those secrets? So what's one thing that in the presentations you give, whether you're lecturing to your students, you're giving presentations at conferences, you're giving a presentation to your president and your provost, one thing that you do or will do differently in terms of planning your time? Kate says planning 2/3 of the time, and I'll put engagement much earlier. Excellent. Alan says engage the participants really early. Bill Baker says he's already using script, so that's an awesome deal. Alice says I always write and practice a script. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because it's easier to get off your script and go and make it sound more natural if you had a script in the first place. And Whitney says, I knew about telling stories, but I never really use it, so I'll try that. Excellent, excellent. Jillian is saying, I won't start with a long intro about our school or group. By the way, you can give people that information. Just don't do it out loud, and we'll talk about that in a second. Ramona Banks says, I love to connect with my participants with storytelling at least once. Excellent. Kristen says, more focus on engagement. Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that's a real theme that runs through this whole thing. Joel says, I need to be more intentional about forward planning. I have a tendency to talk too much. Oh, welcome to the club. That's me too, actually. It's why webinars are kind of my favorite thing to do, because I'm the one talking out loud. By the way, you also can talk out loud on this webinar if you want to. Just put a hand up, and we'll welcome you to give your comments verbally if you'd like as well. Carolyn also says, I'll present in 20-minute increments and with only 15 minutes prepared, leaving 5 minutes for conversing. That's a good deal, actually. It's 2/3 isn't a law, but it's more like a guideline. And Cindy is saying, plan for 2/3 and always allow time for engagement and interaction. You folks have got this down pretty well, so let's keep going here as we do a little bit more thinking and doing. So visuals. Have you ever seen a slide that looks like this one? And I grabbed this from a colleague, and I won't name that person. But the second secret is how to use visuals. So let's do a little skill check, a thought exercise around what you see on your screen. I'm going to show you 2 presentation slides. Now, I'd like you to write down one main idea from each of these slides. We'll pause to look at the first one, and then we'll continue on to a second one as we go. So here's the first one. Think about or write down one of the main ideas on this slide. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, here's the next slide. This actually has the same information as the other one. And can you write down one of the main ideas on this slide in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Which one was easier? It's obviously the second one. Why is that true? Because the second secret is, how do you use visuals to communicate information to your audience? And you'll notice that if I go backwards here and flip to that first slide, this is how PowerPoint wants us to put information in. I actually used the heading box that PowerPoint presents to us, and then it said insert a picture here. And so I used a picture of a worksheet that my colleague was using. The problem here is that on the webinar, you might be at a screen where you can read all of this. But if we were in a face-to-face room and this screen were 20-something feet away from you, there's no way you're going to be able to read all of that small type. And there's so much information on the screen that it's entirely likely you weren't paying a lot of attention to what I was talking about, because we read things when they are put in front of us, regardless of what they are. If we are presented with text, we're going to try to read it, and that sucks up all of our attention. So on this slide, there's less information on the slide, and that means that we can actually have a conversation. So as we start thinking about visuals, here are some of those secrets. The first one is, think about the text that you are presenting to people. Put a dark background and light text. I know you're going to find experts who tell you do exactly the opposite, and we can have that conversation in a few minutes. For most presentations, it's easier to read lighter text on a darker background. Use a sans serif font. Serifs are those little doohickeys that make it easier to read letters when they are 8 inches away from your face. So Times New Roman is a font that has serifs. They're the little hang-offs on the edges of the letters. And that allows your eye to skim across a line of text more easily. Now, on a larger screen and with fewer words, you don't need to skim fast. You need to be able to slow down. And that's why those sans serif fonts, the ones without the little doohickeys hanging off of the ends of the letters, those are the ones you want. And make your text big. This is 54-point font. And as you're looking at it, this enhances readability at a distance and on a larger screen. So far, I don't think I've told you anything that is earth-shattering. But here comes the secret. One of the best practices in presenting information is not to give the information in the screen stuff that you're putting up there. In fact, almost all of the information that I'm sharing with you, the stories, the examples, I'm doing that verbally. And Bob Hales mentioned that we're doing closed captioning for this session, and that's another way that you can follow along. But you'll notice that I'm not just repeating what's on the screen, and I'm certainly not using the screen as a notes category for myself so that I'm just reading stuff off the screen to you. That helps you stay more engaged as we're going along here. And it sounds like somebody has a question. I hear some audio running here. Does somebody want to jump in? All right, awesome. Sorry about that. And when we're talking about few words, a lot of my slides don't have any words on them at all. They are meant to be things that establish a mood or that are examples of the things that I'm talking about to the audience. The other part that gets people is that they want to put images on their slides, and they don't use the whole frame. They think, oh, well, this image was this big when I pasted it in, that'll be the size that it is. This image would have so much more impact if I just filled the frame. If I bring the image up to a larger size using all the space that you have available, that means that Granny in the back row can actually read your slides and see the images without her glasses. That means you're an expert presenter. Here's another thing to work with when you're thinking about visuals. Use surprise and the unexpected. We remember things that go against what we are expecting. So the worst thing you can do is have a slide of statistics and then another slide of statistics and then another slide of statistics and so on and so on and so on. One of the big rules of improv comedy, you've all heard about the yes and. You never say no, you just say yes and. And the other rule is called the rule of three. If you have a list of things, make sure that the third thing is not part of the list. So if you're talking about apples, oranges, and hand grenades, the hand grenades can be funny because they're not actually part of the list. Using unexpected ideas or surprises, asking people to look at things from a different perspective, asking people to do a thought experiment where the answers aren't necessarily intuitive. For example, I put up all those words that had to do with how effective presentations go, and everybody took their best run at them. And some of the results were unexpected. Everybody said things like eye contact and body language, which definitely work and are not necessarily the most effective things. So the element of surprise or the unexpected is also a way to use visuals. By the way, when you are looking for visuals, be inclusive. If you're working with an audience that is racially diverse, that is gender diverse, make sure that you reflect diversity in the content that you're using. One of the other things to do when you're presenting and speaking is, instead of talking about a professor or a student, talk about professors in plural and students in plural. Be as inclusive as you can. Make sure that your presentations also reflect the people who are there in the presentations as well. So let's take a few minutes here. We talked a little bit about some cool practices here. We talked about using text and making it big and light on a dark background. We talked about having few words on your slides so that people will actually pay attention to you talking with them. And we also talked about how to fill the frame with visuals and how to use the unexpected or surprises in the visual dimension as well as in your planning. And we also talked a little bit about being inclusive and more diverse. Let's take a pause here. And if you'd like to come on and talk with us out loud, or if you'd like to engage in the chat, tell us one thing that you're already doing with your visuals that is a good practice. Tell us something that we didn't put here and add to our knowledge, or tell us one thing that you'd like to try out. Kristen's already saying here, I like the list of three, making the third item in the list being the unexpected. That would definitely be unexpected. Excellent, excellent. I can also encourage everybody, after you're done with this conference, go and take a look at those sort of rules of comedy, and you'll find out that they're fairly structured, and you won't ever watch a comedy show the same way ever again. I see a couple other folks are typing things in here. Kate says, I like the expanded photo idea, assuming I have a high quality image. If you don't have a high quality image, use the features of PowerPoint or whatever slide presentation software you're using and just turn it artistic. Make it blurry or do the watercolor thing, turn it black and white. You'd be surprised, even with low quality images, what you can do to fill the frame. Kristen says, don't ruin comedy for me. Oh, it doesn't ruin it. It actually makes it a lot more fun when you know some of the background and insider stuff. Joel says, as someone who operates in the realm of the social sciences, I work a lot in presenting images and sources. Excellent point. This is not just for you literature and humanities folks. This is especially useful in the social sciences and STEM, where you do have a lot of data to share. Cutting through clutter is what you want to do in the presentation. And when we talk about the next secret, we're actually going to dive in on what Joel is talking about here as well. Carolyn says, I try to remember the culture and ages of online students so that I'm reflecting diversity in emails of encouragement and in lecture notes. Way to go, and way to expand what we're talking about here. Nicely done. Kate says, that's a good idea. Thank you. I love that we are being honoring everybody else's ideas here. That's cool. Nikki says, I like using fewer words. You don't have a tendency to read to folks then. That's the worst. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the worst. So I'm really grateful that you've got a few pieces here. We're halfway through the secrets, and you folks are doing really well here on the live presentation. And oh yeah, Kristen's saying Google lets you search images by sizes, choosing large images so they aren't blurry. There's another presentation on copyright and fair use coming up later on, so we'll talk about that one later. Awesome deal. And secret number 3 leads out of these other secrets, and it's in how much detail you present. And when Josh said he works in the social sciences and he's using a lot of visual images and lots of statistics and details, this secret is for Joel, well, and for all of us as well. So let's do a little checking of our skills here when we're talking about the level of detail that we present. Take a minute and predict how many different details are displayed in 1 minute of the average TED Talk. Don't count what the presenter says, just what he or she displays on the screen. Do you have your prediction? Pop that into the chat. Per minute, how many details are on the screen in the average TED Talk? Per minute. What do you think? Alice says 2. Valerie's got 3. I see 1, 6, 5, 4, 1, 1, 2, 10. 10 again. So we're clustering around 1 and 2, and we're clustering around 5 and 6, with a few outliers around 10. You know what the actual answer is? 2 per minute. People who are giving TED Talks almost never change their slides. Now, does that mean that you can't have lots and lots of slides that go from, click, click, click really fast? You certainly can. But the TED Talk format, that 18-minute distillation of things, that makes you move really fast with your information. And it means that the level of detail that you can share is necessarily simple. And we'll talk about why simple presentations can be about complex data and information. So one of the best practices is to have 4 or fewer takeaways for your audience. Your research is complex. The things you teach are complex. Your presentation, though, should not be. Give your audience an overview of your ideas, the process, or the conclusion that you come to, and give them a simple set of takeaways to remember. This session itself has only 4: time, visuals, details, interactions. That's it. So that best practice is keep your takeaways to a manageable number, 4 or fewer. Here's the best practice that I've been hinting at for a while now, and Joel actually almost gave away this secret. Your research is complex, so all the details that you might want to share on your screen, you should still share them with your fellows in handouts. Put in the charts, the graphs, the tables, the white paper theory stuff, all that. The real point of a presentation is to get people interested in learning more about your ideas. So the more should be in your handouts, like I'm doing with this session. Actually, if you go to the conference website, there is a handout with more details and information that goes along with this webinar. Oh, and don't give the handouts to your people before, give them after. Otherwise, they'll just start reading during your session and they won't be paying attention. Another part of how you select your details is simplifying information and data. Sometimes your point is your information. So when you share data, and Ramona says, or they'll just leave with the handout, and she puts the lol, and that's definitely a lol if somebody just grabs your handout and runs. But simplifying your data, this is a way to get people to stick around. So when you share data, show patterns that can be discerned without having to look at a lot of labels. Don't provide more than 2 or 3 trends when in the same data set on the same screen. Break it out. Present one idea or one comparison at a time, and be sure to explain verbally what people see on the screen. So, for example, on the screen, here's a person who is touching an iPad, and there are several bar charts that move up and down in a cycle, and every cycle is a little higher in the up and down pattern. Oh, yeah. And you also have to remind people a lot about the structure that you're giving them. Remind them regularly how what they are seeing and hearing now maps onto your larger topic and goals. A couple of images ago, I just mentioned that we've only got 4 big things for you to take away: time, details, visuals, and interaction. I'm going to say that a lot because that's what I'd like for you to take away. Is that super simplifying things? Yes. And that is how people will actually remember it, even though there's a lot of science that goes into why those things are the most effective. You'll notice we're not actually going to dive into that on this webinar, but it's in the handout and you can go learn more. So, and by the way, in a 45-minute session, you should plan for at least 2 stop and review points to tie everything together. We're going to do 4 stop and review points in this one. And just like with the visuals, when you're including details, be inclusive there. Demonstrate the diversity of your work, research, and ideas. Show how your presentation applies to participants from varying institutional types, walks of life, background, or at least explain why your presentation applies to only one sort of audience. So, when we think about details, we've talked quite a bit about planning things out, having 4 or fewer takeaways. We talked about giving people all of the information and details, but in the handouts. We talked about simplifying data so that when people see information on the screen, especially if it's complex, you can simplify it and help them see one piece of it at a time. We also talked about reminding everybody about what you're talking about and what the big takeaways are. And we talked about being inclusive in the details. If anybody would like to come on verbally and talk out loud about one of the things that you are doing well, want to do, or that you can add to our conversation, please do so now or pop over into the chat and let us know how you're thinking around details and how much, what you choose, and the level that you share. I see a bunch of folks typing, so we'll give them a couple of seconds here. And it looks like our colleagues who are typing are writing the Magna Carta on this one. I think we've really hit an engagement point. Kristen is saying, I give too many takeaways is what I recognized. And then she gives the wah wah emoji next to it. That's actually not something to be terribly ashamed of. We as academics, we do this a lot. We are so used to saying, I have 18 things that I want you to remember, that we give presentations on 18 things. The challenge there is if we're teaching a class or we have a presentation at a conference, giving 4 things at a time and then giving a few different presentations on those 4 things, or taking those 18 things and putting them into 4 big groups. It doesn't mean that you're dumbing it down for people. It just means that you're helping them to take the first step toward deeper understanding. And that's what a presentation really does. So this is where you get keynoters who, they'll get up on stage and they'll suddenly dive down into the weeds of their research, and everybody's kind of checking their phones and on social media. But it's those presenters who keep things simple, keep it in your brain so that you can have everything in mind and think at the high level about things. And then when we do want to dive deeper into details, it's in conversations like this one, where we're talking with everybody else and we say, oh, well, how does that have an impact for what you're doing? How can you actually plan this out? I see that there are a couple of other folks typing, but nobody has hit that return key yet. Did we have more ideas here? Let me pause for a second and let a few folks type some more. While that's happening, I'm going to take a sip of water. This pause is brought to you by me being caffeine free for about 9 years now. And if you can believe it, this is the slower, calmer version of me. So the caffeine is probably a good thing for me to get rid of. Here's some more comments. Carolyn is saying, I simplify data by being direct and avoiding filler words like there are many. I just name what it is. And Ramona is saying, lol to my caffeine story. So are you ready for the last one? So the first one was time management, how you spend it, how you design it, how you plan it. The second one was visuals, how you use them, where they go, how to use text and visuals. Tyler asks, any thoughts on using paper handouts versus digital handouts, just trying to save the trees? I'm perfectly happy to give digital handouts. In fact, there are no physical handouts for this particular webinar. And as long as your audience has a way to get to those handouts quickly and easily. So for example, if you have a list of all your participants and you can email them the link to your digital handouts, you put them into some file sharing space like Box or Dropbox, that's great. Megan says, any thoughts about Prezi versus PowerPoint? My thought is use the tool in a way that the creators did not design it. PowerPoint will lead you to create bullet points of text, and that's probably the worst way that you can use it. Prezi wants you to create content within content, and you jump around like a flea hopping around in the content, and that gives some people motion sickness. The simpler, the better. I'm actually using only 2 features of PowerPoint right now in this presentation. One of them is the fade from one image into the next. And the other is I'm using text boxes so that I can have consistent visual elements. You'll notice that all of the main slides have, excuse me, you'll notice that all of the main slides have the titles right there over the image. And you'll notice which of the secrets we're on by looking in the top right-hand corner. I put the number of the secret up there so you can tell when you get this presentation slide deck as a PDF later on, you can see these are all secret number 3, these are all secret number 4, and it's time for secret number 4. And of course, secret number 4 is right back where we started. If engagement was the first thing you do with time management, interaction throughout is the marker that sets apart the people who are the rockstar presenters from the people who are just sharing information with you. So let's do a quick skill check and do some thinking here. Think of a conference session that you've attended recently, either in person or here as part of this one. But how often were you asked to actually do something, anything, during the session? And what was one of those tasks? Take a second. If you'd like to come on with the microphone, please do. Or if you want to just type it into the chat real quick. But the last time you were in a conference session and you were asked to do anything, what was that anything? What's one thing that you were asked to do? D. Barton says participate in a poll. Alan says fill out a survey. Yeah, poll everywhere, some type of quiz question, take a poll. Kristen says, other than this conference, I'm rarely asked to communicate. Yeah. Joel says, think, pair, share kind of thing. So turn to your neighbor and talk. Teachera says, a poll. Catherine Tansky says, we had a learning activity. Whitney says, not very often. One memorable one, we were given a piece of paper with something on it. At one point later, we roamed the room and found people similar to us based on what was on the paper. Carolyn says, find out what I had in common with someone else. And Carolyn says, I did not like that. And this is one of the dangers of interaction. Interaction just for its own sake can feel at best twee and at worst icky, especially for those of us who are not extroverts. There's a whole bunch of introverts among us, and we want to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, go and talk to 3 other people and find out more about them. That can be a particular sort of hell to people. So when we talk about interaction, it has to be in the service of the learning that you want to take place. So oh, and Nikki's saying here, there's another one, contribute to an open Google Doc so that ideas could be shared among the audience freely and we could all access the information later. It was pretty cool. These are awesome practices. Thank you very much for getting us set up here. And you've given away 3/4 of this secret. So you folks know what you're looking for. Now let's talk about how to do it from the presenter's side. So here we have a picture of someone driving down the highway, and this person has that person's hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. If you think about the steering wheel as the face of a clock, for those of you under the age of 18, a clock is a round thing with 2 sticks on it that helps you tell time. Then this person has the hands up at 10 and 2. They actually don't teach 10 and 2 to our 15 and 16-year-old driver's ed students anymore. They teach them to put their hands at the side of the wheel at 9 and 3. The reason is airbags. If the airbag deploys and you have your hands near the top of the wheel, your wrists will cross and you'll break your wrists, and just a split second later, they'll hit yourself on the forehead and you'll get a concussion. But if you have your hands on the sides of the wheel and the airbag has to deploy, it'll push your arms away from your body and you'll get maybe a little bruise on your shoulder. There you go. A surprising detail and a little bit of a public safety announcement as well. Why am I talking about driver's ed? 10 and 2 is a discredited or outdated practice in driver's ed, but it's a wonderful practice for presenters. 10 is 10 minutes. Give information for no more than 10 minutes before you take 2 minutes and ask your participants to take some kind of action. Here's the fun neuropsychology thing that underpins this, and this is a little bit down in the weeds, but it's a fun detail to remember. It doesn't actually matter whether what you ask people to do for 2 minutes has anything at all to do with what you've been talking about for 10 minutes. It's the act of taking a break and refocusing your attention that helps you to remember things better. So for each of these secrets, I've been talking for about 6 or 7 minutes, in some cases 10. And at the end, I've given a little summary of what we talked about, and then I asked everybody to take a couple of minutes and share your thoughts. Also, notice what I did. I didn't say, hey, everybody type something into the chat. Thank you very much. Oh, I see nobody's chatting with me, and I'm just going to keep forging ahead. I didn't do that. Be comfortable with silence. Silence doesn't indicate people don't have anything to say. Silence indicates I'm thinking about it. And in every room, there's, if we're at a banquet or a buffet, nobody wants to take the first piece of shrimp off the tray. And nobody wants to take the last one, except for that guy that we no longer invite. But it's the same way when we're thinking about conversation and ideas. Nobody wants to be the first person to speak up, but once somebody does, all of a sudden ideas start coming. So be comfortable with some silence. That's why it's 2 minutes, even if you really only want a sentence or two out of everybody. So 10 and 2, not a good place to drive, but a wonderful place to break up your information in a presentation. The next thing we're going to talk about is called QQQ. I made this up just so you can remember it, and it means quantitative versus qualitative questions. So to get better interactions, instead of asking, say, how many of you have encountered student information system glitches? That's a yes or no question. That's a I did or I didn't, and then we're done. That's not interaction. That's just leading people. But if you reframe it qualitatively, how often do you encounter data glitches in the SIS? What happened the last time you found a data problem in your student information system? Just shifting away from closed-ended questions increases interaction. You'll notice that I didn't say, has anybody encountered this problem? And then people would just say, yes, I have. But I said, when was the last time somebody ran over time? What did you think about it? Asking those open-ended questions means that you are actually inviting conversation. So qualitative over quantitative questions, or QQQ. And the other Q is quizzes. So you saw that when I asked as the thought exercise here, everybody said we took a poll, we used Padlet, we used Quizlet, we contributed to an open Google Doc, we took a test, or there was some kind of a double check here. That is an awesome way to get people to engage with information that you're presenting in real time and see who's with you and who's following along. We've been using the chat feature, but I could easily have put a poll together. By the way, on the screen, you see two clouded leopard cubs, and the poll is real easy. Which one is cuter, left or right? That's the poll. That's it. And so if, then of course, this also reminds you to use the unexpected or the surprising in your presentations. And we have a couple of votes. People are saying the one on the right, people are saying the one on the left. Some people are saying the one on the left, right? And people are just putting it in. I'll just cut through the tension right now. It's the one on the right. So we can talk about that later. And of course, one of the best practices here, when you're trying out these inclusive interaction methods, or excuse me, when you're trying out interaction methods, be inclusive. Inclusion in your interactions goes way beyond just calling on various people during Q&A sessions. Ask for feedback in various ways. You know what I did here in this webinar? I said, put it in the chat, write it down for yourself, or come on to the live mic. And be okay if people select one thing and not the other. Nobody has come onto the live microphone yet, and that's entirely all right. But purposely engage with everyone. If you give your live session participants blank sheets of paper and ask them to write down their ideas before they share with a neighbor, or instead of sharing with a neighbor, let people be comfortable doing things by themselves or in concert with each other, and let them choose to what makes them comfortable. You heard one of our participants say, hey, we did that talk to a neighbor thing and it really kind of icked me out. Also, make sure that participants have enough time to think and respond during your interactions. One of the big rookie mistakes is that a presenter will say, anybody got a question? Or here, write this down. And then literally 4 seconds later, they go, okay, thanks. And then they move on. And if you collect written responses, pull a few randomly to respond to instead of trying to go through the entire thing. And Claire has a comment on this one. I always appreciate not being forced to collaborate when unprepared for that type of activity. And most people are unprepared for that type of activity. So thank you for sharing and underlining that with us. Okay, it's time to pause for this last secret and talk about how you're going to build it yourself. So for interaction, we talked about 10 and 2, 10 minutes and 2 minutes. Give information and then get people to take an action. We talked about QQQ, which is qualitative versus quantitative questions. We talked about using quizzes as a really fun and easy way to increase interaction, and we can argue about the merits of clouded leopard cubs. And we talked about how to be inclusive that goes beyond just asking questions of different people. So in the chat, or if you'd like to come on the live microphone, please let us know how you're going to use it, how you're going to do it. Are you doing something good right now? Can you add to our conversation? Or have we sparked an idea that you'd like to try? I'll take a sip of water and let everybody do a little typing and speaking. And Alice is saying, I'll use the poll and quiz for enjoyment and QQQ for substance. Ooh, good distinction to make there. I got to think more about how I would figure that as well. Cool. Thank you for some good food for thought on that. I see a few other folks are typing, so pause for a second here. Ramona says, I'm definitely gaining a lot of good information on how to present and create PowerPoint presentations. Thank you very much. I'm glad this is useful for you. And I see a couple other folks are typing in. There we go. Kristen is saying the be comfortable with silence is important to remember. I've heard to give it 60 seconds of think time. That can feel like forever with 25 pairs of eyes on you. Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, there's a little presenter's secret about how to spend those 60 seconds of silence. And that is, I have my glass of water here. I have a script that I can read from. I have documents. I even have my mobile device. And I say, while you're thinking, I'm going to go look up some information. And I'll go look up information or I'll get ready for the next piece. But that keeps me engaged. And 60 seconds goes very fast when you're also engaged. And Whitney says, very useful. I've already started creating a PowerPoint for a Friday seminar in the classroom. It's called Wait Time. Yeah, absolutely. And Joel says, I like the idea of basic trivia to honor the 10 and 2. I use thought exercises as anticipatory activities to preview content. Yeah, thought exercises are powerful things, especially when you're asking for people's understanding before you give them the information and then ask again after. Carolyn says, if I use a quantitative question, I'll always put in a /why or why not. Oh, that's a good way to make it qualitative. And she says, I love silence and I appreciate those who do not love hearing themselves talk. When I have something to say, I say it, but I wanted to add to the conversation. I'm right there with you. And Claire says, like acting, having a physical activity, I think actors call it a bit, makes silence more engaging. Be careful though with that. One of the challenges is if I'm talking over your thinking time, it means that you now have to do double channeling to try to pay attention to what I'm saying. So I try to be as unobtrusive and quiet during the thinking time as possible. I'll talk about things that you don't have to pay attention to, like, hey, I'm going to have a sip of water now, and now I'll be quiet for a couple of seconds. So splendid. This is awesome. And are you ready for the blessing? If this were a religious service, this is where I like lay hands and you folks would receive the blessing. There's one last thing. We talked about all 4 of these secrets. And the one last thing is literally one last thing. And that is, we remember the ends of our experiences much more clearly than any other part. So be sure in your presentation to include a succinct recap of your ideas at the end. And here we're going to do it. We talked about how you manage your time, how you create and work with visuals, the level of detail that you choose to present, and the details that you can give in other ways, like giving handouts. And we talked about the levels and ways of interactions. So if you remember nothing else from our time today, remember these 4 things. And here they are at the end, because the neuropsychologists tell us our brains are primed to remember the stuff that happens at the end. And Ramona says, laughing my butt off, LMBO. So with our last couple of minutes, what's one thing that you're going to take away from our time together? Whether it's something you're already doing, something you want to explore more, a question you have. You notice that I don't end by asking, are there any questions? Because there never are. Or if someone has one, that's fine. But if you ask people to think about what they will do with the information, you give them a concrete task that they can do. So now I'll be quiet for a second if anybody wants to come on the live line and talk out loud, or put your one takeaway into the chat. What's your one thing? Alice says, I want to focus on narrowing my details. It's awesome too, because if there are questions later on, then you can whip out all the details you didn't have time to get to in the base presentation. Bob says, buy your book. Actually, the content that we're talking about here, I am going to be writing a book on how to present information for academics. And this is a little bit of a test toward that book. So thank you, Bob, for the shameless plug. Kristen says, Alice took my takeaway. That's okay. You're allowed to share. There's plenty to go around. And Megan says, using only pictures for my slides or few words. Awesome. D. Barton says, I really like the 10 and 2 idea. Steph Rogers says, pausing is always tough for me, so being more intentional with that. Awesome takeaway. Alan says, my visuals will be less text and more photos that stretch to the edges of the screen. Nicely done. Thank you. Carolyn says, I'll focus on interactions and ways to get everyone engaged. That's really important. Clark Roman says, I promise to recap. That's really important. And if you can get your learners to help you with the recap, that's even better. Kate Johnson underlines pausing and allowing for space. Joel says more balance in future presentations. I can underline the 10 and 2 on that. And Kristen says more of a focus on review at the end, since it's what will be most remembered. That's the absolute truth. CBC e-learning says using pictures only or primarily, but be careful about accessibility. You'll notice for accessibility, I've been describing what's on the screen. So if you were just phoning into this presentation, you might not have to say, oh, what does the picture say? And so most of my pictures are decorative, and when they're not, I describe them out loud. And then they get picked up in the captions, and that's a more accessible way of doing things. So thank you, CBC e-learning, for that sidebar on accessibility. Claire says, I agree, the recap is very important, and a slide that says thank you and provides my contact information. Oh, you're going to love the next slide. And Alice says, I'm trying to think of tactful ways to introduce this presentation content to many colleagues and administrators. Get with me after the presentation, and I can help with that. And Hannah says, reviewing at the end is something that I will begin to incorporate in my class sessions. Thank you for all of the great information. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching the recorded version of this and everybody who's here on the live webinar. You made this more fun and engaging for me. And you know what? I planned for about 40 minutes of presentation, and here we are at 56 minutes, and we're getting ready to wrap up. That's because we had time to pause, to answer your questions, to get some thinking done. And if you want to learn more about what I do, Bob Hales mentioned my books. I specialize in things that kind of scare the heck out of faculty members and people in higher education, things like copyright, accessibility, academic integrity, alternative academic careers, evaluating online teaching, stuff like that. And you can see my speaking brochure. I love to work with other folks. If you go to my website, it's on your screen right now. It's thomasjtobin.com. Thus endeth the commercial. I'd love to work with you. If you'd like to continue the conversation, just go there. And somebody even mentioned, hey, I wonder how I put the ending slide with my contact information. Here's the last trick. Your opening slide should also be your ending slide. So I want to say thank you very much again to Bob Hales and to the conference team for inviting me to come work with everybody. I hope this has been a useful and practical session for you, and I'm very grateful to be part of the Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Conference again. So thank you, everybody, and I'll see you online and on the road. Take it away. I'll turn it back over to Bob.
Tom, thank you so much. Yes, it's always good stuff that we can take away from your presentation. So somehow I have a feeling you'll be with us next year too. Probably write another book by then, I would guess. So.
Well, I've got to, I was going to say, I've got to get this one done. So keep your fingers crossed, and I'll see everybody as we go out there in the publishing sphere and on the conference trail. And by the way, everybody who's on this line right now, if I see you in the halls and you say, hey, I was on that session, I'll stop and spend 10 minutes with you. I'd love to hear your story. So thanks again, and have fun with the rest of the sessions in this conference. Take care, everybody. Bye now.
Yes, thanks everyone, and that's our